Let's talk about some cost optimization strategies, and we're going to cover 6 strategies here. So the first strategy is just appropriate provisioning, and this is kind of what it seems like. We're just going to provision the resources that we need and really nothing more. Now, this seems simple, but there's many cases where I personally have left instances running when I didn't really need to. And that's one of the things I can do to reduce my costs is just be aware of what's running, why it's running, and shut down the stuff that I don't need. Sometimes I can consolidate for greater density. For example, if I have a bunch of DynamoDB databases, they all have a minimum provisioning read and write capacity. I can maybe consolidate those into one big DynamoDB database and then take better advantage of those read-write capacity units than I was when I was dealing with small databases. CloudWatch can help me by monitoring the utilization of my resources. And if I realize that some of my instances aren't being very highly utilized, maybe I can scale them back. Okay, so in this case, we have 4 dbt2 small multi-AZ databases, and that's going to cost us $287.80. Well, we can consolidate those into one database, and we can save some money that way. It's not a whole lot, but every little bit helps, especially when you're dealing with much larger scale than this. The second item is right sizing. We should really use the lowest cost resource that still meets the technical specifications. As an architect, you can design this into the landscape to make sure that we're using resources consistently and try to avoid spikes and valleys. Loosely coupled architectures are very useful in this case because they can smooth demand and create a more consistent and predictable demand profile than a bunch of spikes and valleys. You should also look at some purchase options. So AWS offers a few different types of purchase options where I can buy equipment at a better price than I'm just using it on demand. If you have a permanent application and you know you're going to be running this instance for a long time, reserved instances are probably going to provide you the best cost advantage there. Spot instances are really good for temporary horizontal scaling, yet another reason why horizontal scaling is preferred to vertical scaling. AWS has a concept known as EC2 fleets, and this allows you to define a target mix of on-demand, reserved, and spot instances to meet your needs. So if we look at M5 2x large, at the time of this recording, the on-demand price is 38 cents. If we decide to do a 1-year reserved, that drops it 40%. And if we want to use just a spot instance, that drops it to 7%. So that's a 79% savings over the on-demand. Now, AWS pricing can vary from region to region. This is something you might want to consider when you're trying to optimize your cost. If another region has a lower price and you don't require that service to be local to your current region, then you might be able to save a lot of money. And even if you are worried about latency, you can still use CloudFront and Route 53 to try to get around that. So if we take the example of S3 standard storage for the first 50 terabytes, US West 2 has the lowest cost per gigabyte. And you can see how the costs increase as we go to different regions. Now back to talking about those soft costs. If we're able to leverage some of the managed services that AWS provides to offload administrative responsibility, well then that's a good thing and that's going to drive our costs down. So for example, if we can use MySQL RDS rather than running MySQL on an EC2 instance, we're going to have a lower total cost of ownership. And we're going to gain that cost savings through not having to worry about the complexity or all the manual intervention that might be required. RDS, Redshift, Fargate, and especially MapReduce. Setting MapReduce up manually is just a big hassle and a big headache. So using these fully managed systems can really help us lower the complexity and lower the cost. Now you should also think about data transfer because as you know, moving data into AWS doesn't cost anything, but moving data out and between regions does cost something because that could comprise a significant cost component for us if we're shuffling data around a lot. And in some cases, Direct Connect, although maybe on the surface it looks more expensive, it could actually be more cost effective in the long run, depending on what sort of data we need and our speed requirements.